Now they can hear us.
Oh my god.
And get ready for this. Now they can see us.
Yo, visual aids, the best kind of aids. Delete that sentence. We've been here 2 seconds. I've destroyed this. I've destroyed this stream already. Hello, everyone.
Hi, everybody. JM8, thank you. Thank you for being here. Hey, oh, people, yay! Hey, people.
Hello, everyone.
Let me know if that music is too loud or too soft for everybody. It should be at a nice, quiet, low key, but hey.
Yeah, like a crisp volume. I dig it.
Oh, I got an alert. Oh, it's the alert from you.
It's me.
It says you resubscribed for 8 months. And you say Keen AF. Who's the nerd on the stream with you? Well, I'm so glad you asked who this nerd on the stream with me is. It's JM8, legendary game designer, sound designer, and person who will nerd out with me about rules in gaming.
I'm one of those 3 things, and it's the nerding out bit.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, I'm very happy to be here. It's been a long time since I've been on RPG Help Desk, and I've missed it. I'm glad to be back.
Well, I'm glad you're back. We'll have to. Who's Will? It's just me. I'll have to have you back. I can't blame anybody else. I have to do all this myself.
It's Terrence's fault.
Yeah.
Damn Terry and his organizational skills.
Yeah, my handler hasn't properly been communicating with you.
Yeah. What a shame. What a shame. How's everyone in chat? Hope we're all good.
Yeah. Howdy Pants. Howdy Wraithbow. Crawdad. Deebs. Talion. Howdy.
Oh, the whole gang's here.
Also, Pants, congratulations on your victory royale. I'm glad I could corrupt you. I will be more corrupted after this stream because I have to do my second Fortnite stream because they decided
Fortnite.
Yeah, they're paying me to play Fortnite, so that's cool.
That's awesome.
Yeah, I mean, it's just a 2-stream thing, but still, that's freaking sweet. I like getting paid.
That is awesome. Yeah.
Yeah, and then
congratulations. I've never got a Fortnite sponsorship. Jesse, what's happening? You're taking me in the leagues, dude. I just got a little bit streamer jealous there. Ooh.
But you have more subscribers and like way more video views on your videos than I do. It's a give and take.
What's more important?
Also, you have a full ring in your nose, and I still have my stud.
I do.
And I really like it. It looks sweet.
Thank you. I appreciate that.
Once I have a stable address again, I will order a ring and put it in.
I keep ordering nose rings and none of them show up. I've ordered 40,000 and your other house is just full of nose rings. It's just a sea of nose rings. Yeah. Yeah, no, I dig it. I think it suits my nose.
Yeah, it looks cool. Yeah. I like it.
Yeah.
Cool. Well, yay. Thank you for coming on to nerd out with me about it. There's not a lot of people that I can just kind of obsessively talk about game rules with.
Yeah. I'm that person.
Yeah, and I appreciate that because for a lot of people, it is not a stimulating topic.
It's the most stimulating topic for me. I absolutely adore just discussing rules because it's interesting because I love, like, specifically in tabletop stuff, I love rules and how they can inform how a player plays, but I'm not necessarily a rules lawyer when I play or like DM.
Yeah.
So it's weird. I like studying it and I like understanding it, but I don't like, the last time I was on, we were talking about dice fudging and stuff like that. Like, there's always room to branch out for sure. But yeah, we're gonna get mad nerdy about rules and specifically teaching, like how to tutorialize some stuff. Yeah,
because you really talk passionately about tutorials, which I deeply appreciate because I think, especially playing old games with behind schedule and seeing how tutorials have changed gaming in an extremely positive way.
Yeah.
I think that is something that is still, despite it being such an old form of entertainment, that is still lacking in most tabletop RPGs.
Yeah. And the question is why? Why is it? Because the designers of tabletop RPGs are just as, if not more, passionate about their craft. The amount of obsession that goes into it. The question is, why is the teaching and the tutorialization of tabletop RPGs lacking so much? I don't know. I think one of the main problems is the best way to do any form of teaching is by doing. So in game design, the best way to teach a player to do a thing is to get them to do a thing. And there are so many rules in usually in tabletop RPGs that a lot of the times the only person who has to fully properly understand a thing is the DM, and that can leave players a little bit like I don't know what the phrase would be. Basically, they're getting bombarded with all of this information, but they don't necessarily have the knowledge to properly perform the actions, and the DM kind of has to take that role, and that can put a lot of players off. I've had a lot of potential friends who wanted to play D&D get put off by first of all the complexity of it. Even though once we get into it, we know it's very, very freeform and like freeing experience. You can kind of do whatever you want within the confines, but people view it as complex, and also the complexity of the rules once they get in it puts them off and they don't want to play anymore. Of course, it all depends on the DM. With all tabletop RPG stuff, it all depends on the DM, like everything does. But yeah, there's just so much information, and there's no roundabout way to convey all of that information in a concise way that means that a player will then have every bit of information needed to then play the game. I can think of one way of doing it, but players don't want to do it, which is modules. So if you want to learn how to play the game, there'd be a module that you play through that teaches you the basics of, there is a combat encounter, there is a role-playing encounter within this one short module, and it teaches you about all of the stats and stuff like that. But a lot of people, when they play this, get obsessed with the idea of, this is freeing. This is a really freeing hobby where we can do whatever we want, we can be whatever we want, and they don't want to be confined into this little handcrafted little game. They want to go. But yeah, like I think modules are the way to do it. What are some of the problems with tutorialization that you've seen? Because I love tabletop RPGs, but you're way more of a experience in that field.
The biggest thing for me personally, and I feel like a lot of people have this as well, is like, if I pick up a game, it's because I want to play the game. So if I grab whatever, again, video games being the clear comparison here, if I grab a game off a shelf and I open it, I put it in the drive or install it on my computer, whatever, and I play it, and like it'll start. If I opened it and there is a oversized 6,000 page novel that I first have to read before I played the game, I didn't buy the game to read the novel. I bought the game to play the game. I bought a book to read the book. Books are great, but that's not what I'm doing here. And that's a huge thing that I think really hurts it, is it drops a massive amount of paperwork on you that, in addition to being not the thing you wanted, is also poorly explained.
Yeah, 100%. Like, and that's what we try and avoid in game design wholly. Like, if anyone's seen any of my videos when I talk about tutorials, you don't want to front load all of your information. One, it's just bad teaching. You don't just dump everything on a student and then leave and expect them to take it all in. You teach them as they go, and it progresses gradually. But that is basically impossible when you have systems that are this complex. Like Dungeons and Dragons is the if we're talking about like 5e, is like the obvious comparison, and one that a lot of people will be familiar with. Not only do you have to learn everything to do with character stats and dice rolls and how that works in the combat systems, you also have to learn then how individual classes work, and then how, if you're going into certain classes, how spells work and how those systems work. There's so much to take in, and there's no uniform way to teach that. If we were in a video game and it was very structured and linear, somebody could pick a sorcerer and we could have a way to introduce spell casting bit by bit, introduce some cantrips and then go on and on and on. But we can't really do that. Well, we can, but it's wholly up to the DM to pace that experience. And that's difficult when you've got 5 players all wanting to do different things. And I don't envy any DM ever for struggling to introduce new players to the systems, because it's overwhelming for them as well. But yeah, I'm trying to think what would be a way that we would fix this problem. We're not going to come up with the solution to tutorializing RPGs. People have been trying to do this for yonks, but it's a good exercise. Yeah, so main problem is front-loading information and having to read literal novels to understand it, and that is timed by basically 3 if you're a DM. How would we fix this?
I think one of the things, and a way that I've been trying to do and like actually put into words and like teaching how to play a game for Lexicon, the RPG that I make, is offering sort of like what you were saying with like a bit of a module, but a more condensed version that doesn't have to deal with mechanics as much. So like if we were playing a game, if I can pick your brain on this for a moment.
All right, let's go.
Okay, so we're gonna play a game. We're playing a fantasy game, and you are we're a fantasy game. You're an adventurer in the party, and you are trying to get into a protected tower.
Yes.
How are you gonna get there?
How am I gonna get to the tower?
Yeah, like you're at the tower. How do you want to get in? It's protected. What do you want to do just as a character?
My first question would be, do I have any equipment or anything like that?
Totally up to you. If you're a character that focuses on burglary, like what, you can choose a character you've already played and you just pull from them. Or
okay, I'm a thief and I have a grapple. I'd ask if are there any windows, are there any ledges, and like I've got my grapple and let's try and do that. But this is interesting because like I understand the limitations of tabletop RPGs and like what we can and can't do and what would and wouldn't be a rule. If I was trying to play in the mindset of someone who's never played, which is what these tutorials are for, I'm trying to think, like, and I'm sure chat can chime in with this, and try and think of it from a different perspective, because I find that very hard because I'm biased as fuck. I would probably be like, I try and go up to the front door, or I do something simple like that, or do something crazy outlandish and be like, I can cast Fireball because I'm a mage. I cast Fireball at the tower, and just do something crazy. And in that scenario, how would you... Well, the question is, with this scenario, with the mage tower, what the goal of this tower, what is it trying to introduce?
So what I would want from this is to understand what kind of character you're going to play and how you're going to interact with the world. And once I understand that, then we can use to say you want to be a mage. Like, okay, now I understand that I need to introduce spell casting to you. And how, so now I know here's the part of the rule book essentially that I'm going to have to use for you. Now I know you're going to do spellcasting. You're a thief. You want to climb. You have thieves tools. Awesome. I need to introduce. So I need to introduce like tool usage. I need to get you to do skill checks. So like once I know what you want to do, then I introduce that part. And then with another player, all right, you're at the tower as well. How do you get it? And then they would say
this is like a funky session 0, like a really, really funky individual. You have all been to this mage tower. You've all done this thing. And then you as a DM, and this is, again, this is coming from the perspective of having a very talented DM, in this case, you, being able to figure out what your players need to know. So effectively, you're doing the game's job for the game. You're teaching the thing. It's not necessarily you're
True.
a teacher, right? In that sense,
Mm-hmm.
rather than anything else, which I think a good DM does naturally. I don't think anyone sets out to be like, I'm going to teach my players this, but it happens naturally as you play and you create new systems. But it's interesting the perspective you came from, which is I will do it as we're playing rather than there needs to be a system in place in the base game, in the books themselves to necessarily teach certain things. Because I definitely think the way you're thinking of it could work, but it relies on probably. Would it rely on an already experienced DM?
Kind of. My thought being, if it's clear in the rule book, then the GM would be able to look at it and go, all right, cool. I've read, I understand. And now, rather than making someone else read it, I will create an interactive way to gain this knowledge that I have. They should be able to, if a player reads it, they should be able to get the same thing. Like, they should be able to read it and go, oh, now I understand. I can do whatever.
That's the ideal. That is exactly how I think the designers hope this, like any RPG system, tabletop RPG system works. Because in an ideal world, and this is the case a lot of the times, the DM is the only one who has full knowledge on everything. Like, players aren't going to go through and read like the Dungeon Master's Guide and stuff like that because they don't need to know that stuff. Some people do, but they don't need to know that. They just need to learn how to play. I think it is expected of DMs, and I've never met a DM who doesn't understand that expectation of them, that they do need to a certain degree, understand the rules, or the game can't really run. Obviously there's wiggle room with everything, but they do need to have that understanding. My main problem with the tutorialization is players rather than DMs, and your suggestion with it is the ideal way of fixing it, and that's kind of, in a sense, like you said, like a boiled down module kind of sense, which is an experience that every player goes through, and then relevant information is taught to them. And when you said Mage Tower, it really reminded me of in World of Warcraft, in Legion, they had like these Mage Towers, which were challenges that the players could do to get certain skins, and they were really difficult, and they were limited time and stuff. And it would be really cool if there were. I know this sounds weird because tabletop RPGs are so freeform, but if there was an incentive for players to want to do these things. So like, oh, if you do the Mage Tower, you can get an extra level, and you'll start at level 4 rather than 3, and or you can pick a magic item at the top and stuff like that. An incentive to do it, just like with tutorials in games, we have to give certain like either intrinsic, extrinsic, or narrative rewards based on the tutorials they're doing. We're never just making them learn a thing.
I think that's a really good point, actually, is that in tabletop RPGs, tutorializing and like learning the game generally has no reward to it. Like, no, that really rings as a problem. Yeah. Like, especially since again, kind of self-fulfilling negative prophecy of like, if you attempt to understand it but interpret the rules differently, or don't read something, or think, oh, I understand how this mechanic works, so it must apply to this other thing, but in that system it doesn't, you've then had a negative for a thing that you tried to do.
Yeah,
that's
and then
no fun.
You're just being punished in a sense.
Yeah,
and then it's embarrassing because if you fail in a tutorial in a video game and you're not like streaming or playing with friends, right? Big deal, right? It doesn't matter. Like, you just move on, you try the thing again, you move on. If you misunderstand a rule and attempt to do something really cool, but you've misunderstood a rule and now you can't do it, and you've got experienced players around you, that is to some people embarrassing and will disincentivize them from wanting to do those things again, or attempting to do things again, because they might fuck up and embarrass themselves. Like, I don't understand the rules, I'm terrible at this game, and I think that's another thing with like tabletop RPGs. A lot of new players view people who already play it as like experts and people who know everything, and that's not the case. 9 times out of 10, the DM has no fucking clue what they're doing.
Yep.
And that's the best thing about this hobby. But it can be embarrassing, and that doesn't happen in video games. And I think actually rewarding, and when I say reward, for people listening, it doesn't necessarily mean giving them a thing, or like giving them an object, like an extrinsic reward, where they get something. It can be just the kind of like satisfaction of doing the thing. It's a skill-based thing, gives them a chance to make those crazy ideas. It can be as simple as, there is this mage tower, I want you to try and get into it in the most creative way you can with your character. What is the most creative way your thief could get into this building? Or setting up specific challenges. So the mage tower for a thief class is different to the sorcerer one, where there are different levels of the mage tower that will teach a different thing, be it stealth or something like that. And you were talking, Jesse, about having that be kind of improvisational, with like, okay, well, they want to get in this way, so I can teach grappling, I can teach this, I can teach that. Because of my linear brain, I would want to have it be right. So if I know they're this type of character, I need to whip out this mage tower, which is going to teach them grappling, it's going to teach them sneaking, it's going to teach them sneak attacks, it's going to teach them stealing. And then I know that they have got all of the knowledge they need to then be a semi-successful thief and play to a basic level. But that takes away some of the fun of role-playing and stuff. If they're like, okay, you're on level 2 now, and this is the sneaking section, and because if the player comes up with a creative way to get past things, saying no to those things is a no-go. Like I think we discussed this last time I was on. Saying no to the player is something I try to basically never do, unless it completely goes against the rules of the game or the rules of my world. So yeah, I'm not sure which would work best, but I think an incentive to do the thing is what's missing. But how do you do that? Like, I don't know.
It is really hard. The non-linearity of it is part of what gets me too. Like, where if you could solve part of it by what do you want to do, and then, are you going to be a Dark Souls tutorial of what's your class, and then you all start in the dungeon and it teaches you the basics, but you only get the pyromancer if you choose the pyromancer build and the pyromancer hand. But with it is a little more, I'm wondering if railroading is a helpful tool in this regard, because a lot of times it is, where you do want to teach them in that step-by-step process of like, look, here's how distance is done in this game, just movement. You have to get to this point, here's how you do it. And that could be something very easy, like you just have to walk across the room, it's this far, there's an object in the way, and now you understand that it takes you double movement for one whatever to go across difficult terrain, or however the game runs it. And then trying to set it up like that, but I don't there's also the creativity of like, oh, well, that's cool, but like, I'm gonna freaking web swing across this area because that's something that I can do because of whatever.
Like, that's really cool, and you don't want to say no, because then these are feasibly new players. So you don't want to be like, actually, your really creative thing that would work, you're actually in a tutorial, so you can't. Like, that is a big no-go. I don't know. I think one of the things is maybe compartmentalizing all of these tutorials into smaller sections that are teaching multiple things. So like teaching things like movement can also be done while also teaching at sneaking and line of sight. There can be enemies that are like patrolling or have a certain kind of vision, and then that can be explained by the DM, and then the player has to come up with a way to get past them. That teaches them that they can be seen, it teaches them that they need to move, and they can sneak. And we condense it down, rather than like each floor being like, this is the learn to move forward floor,
Mm-hmm.
and it has 75 floors and they're all terribly boring.
Yeah.
Like we could condense it, and then because in a way, like the main thing with a lot of playing tabletop games is the intrinsic reward of doing the thing.
Mm-hmm.
I came up with a cool idea, it worked, the dice rolls popped off. That's like its own reward in its sense, but I did a creative thing, that is a reward. And I think in a way we want to try and mimic the act of playing and that intrinsic reward as much as we can in a tutorial,
Mm-hmm.
because that is what gets people hooked. And I think the reminder of here is the problem, and knowing that this problem will teach the player something specific, say you move to the door, whether there are enemies, there are traps, or whatever, you have to get from point A to B. Regardless of how they do it, they will learn the basics. And a lot of the times it's just letting the player know that a system is a thing. I think like letting the player know that there are traps, regardless of whether if they web swing over it or not, they are now made aware that there are traps in this game and they can trigger them. So they're going to start thinking creatively again on, okay, could there be traps here? And if so, how could I creatively get past this room? And that's what we want. We want that creative thinking to be happening all the time. So I think our jobs are done in that sense, even if they haven't, disarmed the trap or done a roll to get past it or something like that.
Yeah.
So
well, you brought up a really good point.
Yeah.
That I feel like for the tutorial, it should be about rather than performing like the thing, like you have to disarm the trap, but rather to learn how to avoid the trap. So like however you do it is the thing you're supposed to learn. If you do it by, walking around it, disarming it, swinging above it, cast a spell, fly, that you're learning, oh, here's the thing I can do, and here's how I do it.
Yeah. And communicating to the player that there are a lot of different ways to do this thing. I think a lot of new players, because this is what this is primarily for, it's just the complete new players, they're very stuck in their video game brains of this, there is a problem and there is a solution and I need to figure out the solution. And it's very binary. Whereas in like tabletop RPGs, we can't feasibly do anything, and that's the beauty of it. And encouraging that, again, comes down to the DM. If they're doing this tutorial, I actually think having, like, in my mind, I'm just calling it the Mage Tower now. The Mage Tower tutorial is, for new players, is a fantastic idea to show them what they can do. And I don't necessarily mean that what they can do within the confines of the rules, but what they can do within the confines of their own imagination. And getting them to think, because I've played with players who think very in a binary way, and I have a sword and I can stab, and that is all I can do. Like, that's all I can do. That's what I do. And those are the players that a lot of the times fall off and don't want to play anymore, because they get to combat and they find it very slow, and they see it in a very binary way. But if we as DMs through this tutorial system, and the thing is, this, even after, if you did the Mage Tower, your job as a DM of encouraging creative thinking and teaching the players mechanics never really stops. It's going to be an ongoing thing for like your entire campaign. You're always going to be introducing new creatures, new mechanics, new environments, new hazards to keep your game fresh. So this kind of thought process isn't going to stop. But it's just teaching them you can do whatever you want. This sword has a lot of different uses. And I think that if in the Mage Tower there were these flaws, it's just maximizing that creative thinking for the player. But like you said, you guaranteed know a thing, be it there are traps, you can sneak, you can traverse the environment in different ways. They are always going to guaranteed get a base level of information from each encounter, but encouraging that creativity and being like, you can do whatever you want. And I also think giving the player a set of tools at the beginning, because like we were saying, with having such a big book of information that you need to read to get into the game, it can be very easy to forget what your character is and what they can do very, very quickly. Oh, I've got all these cantrips and spells and items and all of my stats, and when someone says, what do you do? They go, I don't know.
Choice paralysis.
Yeah, exactly. Paradox of choice. And giving them a baseline set of things that are very easy to grasp what they can do. A grapple hook, everyone knows what a grapple hook does. Everyone knows what it's for. If you have that in your inventory, that is an option immediately for you. You're like, oh, I can do this. Or a torch. Everybody knows what a torch does, but also has a lot of creative ways of using it. Rather than just lighting a torch and using it as a light source, you can use it as a propellant and stuff like that. So like giving them a baseline set of tools to kickstart that creative thinking, rather than just screaming at the player, here's the mage tower, think creatively. And just like shouting creative every time they like get into like this lull. Be creative. You know, some people don't think like that, so we've got to try and encourage it in a more step way, break them out of the video game mindset.
There's also on the subject of the video game mindset too, the D&D mindset, because I have no problem saying I don't super enjoy it as a system. But one of the things it does decently is it is a decent like turn-based, grid-based combat system.
Yeah.
And like most of your abilities when you level up are based around combat, and that's fine. But it also teaches people that combat is usually the way forward, and that every problem is a nail and this is the hammer. Yeah. And trying to get people out of that is
because
tough.
That's not what this entire basically the unique thing about this hobby is that we can get through a lot of systems by talking and role playing and thinking creatively, things we can't do in video games. Like, I mean, a lot of you in chat will already have seen my series on the illusion of choice on The Escapist, but like, if you haven't, go check it out. Choice is an illusion in games. You cannot make choices effectively. They're all invisibly done in the background. You're being manipulated. It sucks. Doesn't happen in tabletop games as much. Yes, the DM is manipulating you in a certain sense and playing to the rules, but if you want to talk the orc leader down from absolutely obliterating a village rather than going into the standard boss battle, that is an option, and through certain dice rolls or how you've built your character, you can do that, and that is some of the most rewarding gaming I think I have ever experienced. Like, it is so rewarding. You feel like it was you that did that, be it through your stats, if you're just doing it that way, or through your roleplay. It's super, super rewarding, and it's encouraging players to actually do that. And like you said, D&D, Futz is that instantly by being like, all of your combat, like all of your abilities are combat effectively, unless you go to like really specific ones. And a lot of the time, when you have that kind of mindset with the spells and the abilities, a lot of players go down that route. And even if a couple of you don't want to go down that route, you can't avoid combat, because the problem with role-playing is it usually takes a long time to have these conversations and come up with this dialogue and do that stuff, which is like my favorite thing. But the people who just want combat get bored, and then they go, oh, I just chop his head off, or like I attack, and then you're done. You're just like, okay, I guess that's not happening.
Right.
And then you've really got to know your group properly. But other systems don't do that, which is really interesting. I really enjoy Monster of the Week, which is just giving you lots of abilities to just manipulate the world. And a lot of the combat abilities can be used in the sense of not in combat as well, and that encourages creative thinking. And that's been some of my favorite like role playing I've done in games, because it has forced me to think outside the box. My character was very weak and couldn't really fight, and I had to think of different ways of doing things, and I liked that. But
yeah.
it's just having that experience, because I've played tabletop RPGs before. I knew I could do all those things, and I knew the limitations of that system and what was needed of me. If I was a completely new player, that might have been very difficult for me, because I might be in that combat mindset of, because of video games as well, not just like the way D&D is built in 5e, but because of the way video games is built, combat is the solution. We are always engaging in combat, and it's usually the failure state of failing certain like role play things in games where you say the wrong thing and it initiates combat. That's always kind of the solution, and most of the times also the reward, which is odd. Like, you failed, but you want to do the combat because it's the fun part. And breaking out of that mindset is really hard. And I think a concise tutorial system for whatever RPG system you're using is the way forward. But just like with a lot of tutorials, people aren't going to do it, because the best tutorials are the ones you don't notice, because nobody wants to do them.
Right.
Nobody wants to do tutorials. A lot of people will skip them if they're given the chance, and then will get frustrated when they don't know the thing. To be fair, rightly so, because the game should be teaching you as you go. RPG systems are unique because there is not this handcrafted thing that everyone is going through. It's completely unique to the DM and what's happening. This is why I was saying, like, modules. It can be easy to guarantee the players are gonna like Curse of Strahd with like the hags and stuff like that. You're gonna guaranteed encounter them or do these certain things, so you know the player's gonna learn combat. They're gonna learn certain things about the world and stuff like that. You don't get that in Jimmy's weird 5e homebrew thing. Like, you could start at level 20 and your mind might explode from the amount of options you have. Like, it's just, yeah, it's breaking the players out of mindsets. It's guaranteed teaching them basic information, and it's rewarding them, and that's the main thing I'm hung up on, is the reward. Because you can change it, like, because I'm still thinking in the mindset of 5e, which is like, you know, most parties start at either level 1 or like 3. And extrinsically, what could you reward the player with? You can reward them with more experience, so they will level up. You would have to probably give them a level for them to feel worthwhile if they were like extrinsically motivated. Because this is another thing. All players are motivated differently. This is why we do a spectrum of intrinsic, narrative, and extrinsic. Because people don't care. Some people don't care about items and they just want to think creatively and have fun. Some people just play D&D for the loot. Like, they love getting things and that being the reward. So do you give them a thing? Do you give them this little reward? I'm not sure.
I think that could be a good way to do it. And the idea being that this tutorial that you're doing is essentially part of the character building process. Yeah. Because a thing that gets me is, I might be able to connect all of these disjointed thoughts I have going through my head. A thing to me is that the act of reading a book does not mimic the act of playing the game, and that clear disconnect kind of hurts your ability to understand it, or to understand how to use it, or even to have fun engaged with it. And what if you could make the tutorial and the characterization, or the character creation, kind of essentially a choose your own adventure, and each thing you complete allows you to add something more to your character that you were essentially going to get anyway, because you're building your character. And then this is you'll have 8 things available when you start the campaign, but going through this is how you understand and are introduced to each one and the concepts of the game.
Yeah, I think that's spot on. I think that's how it should be done, because also character creation is an incredibly off-putting and arduous thing to do in a lot of systems. it's very long, and it can be off-putting because it seems very, very complicated. Like, if you introduce someone to D&D and they're like, "Oh, we're doing," and someone just sat there and somebody says, "Oh, we're doing point buy," and you're like, "What? What do you mean by?" "Oh, that basically you roll these dice," and it's like, that's so incredibly complicated to people who don't play the game. So, like, if you introduce each system, like, what are the core things when you make a character? What are the core things? Your background and your name, and your race, and gender and stuff like that. Then you can go down into class and like equipment and background. So with each one of these things, we can introduce parts of the systems. If you say, "Oh, what weapon do you want?" You have the choice of a polearm or a short sword or whatever. I pick a polearm. Okay, well, that getting that polearm isn't just it's in your inventory now for you to forget about because you've been given 1,000 things and you're just like completely intimidated. It's okay. Well, to get your polearm, you go to get it, and it's an actual scene that they have to play out. You go to get it, and you've been struck to the ground, and a polearm falls from another enemy or something, and you pick it up, and to get this, you need to defeat these enemies. And then you become connected to it in the sense like you're taught combat, you're taught how those things work. Your connection to this object, which is just the word polearm in a spreadsheet, effectively, is now becoming something that you claimed and you took, and is becoming personal to you and has a little bit of a story that also informs more role playing, because you could then talk about these stories and it's more backstory for the player to call back on. It's also ways for the DMs to implant certain backstory things that come back in the future. Oh,
yeah,
yes. This is how character creation should be done. This is great. It's just condensing it so it teaches the right things. And the thing is, we could also do it in the same sense of if they picked, say, a thief. The thief, when you pick the thief class, their introductory little scenario teaches specific thief things. It teaches sneaking, it teaches stealing and backstabbing and stuff like that. And that after character creation they will know these things, so they can then use them in the future. And it completely eliminates that awkward session one. In my mind, obviously this is all theory, it would eliminate that kind of session one kind of awkwardness of players not really understanding their characters. Some people do. Some people spend, hours and hours and hours crafting their backstory and working on accents and like coming up with all of these things. A lot of players don't. They want to play, and they show up and they're like, "Oh," and I always imagine it as like the 5 people meeting in the tavern, the generic, "You will meet in the tavern." And it's just 5 people sat at a tavern table, not talking, just like awkwardly looking at each other because nobody knows how to start the roleplay. Like, if they've had this session 0 play session, which you would have to do individually, which is time consuming, but I think it'd be worth it. They would understand their character more. They would understand their gear more. They would understand how their class plays more. And that could even extend to if you did a background, what kind of background do you have? What's your character like? Could introduce them to role playing. There could be a situation where they have to role play. And it really just introduces, it's like I'm going to be bold, it's like a tutorial on how to play the game. I love it. That's a great idea, Jesse. It's a great idea.
I think it was Deeb said in the chat, so is this leading a system agnostic tutorial mode to put on Jesse's itch.io page? I feel like we could absolutely build a mage tower scenario of like, here's a scenario, and within it, here are all the things that'll be introduced.
Yeah.
We could totally do that.
It doesn't need to be like the entire book's worth of information. Like, there are going to be some things that you need to look up. The thing is it all comes back to the idea of manuals. So the question is, what were manuals originally intended for? Were they intended for you to read before you play the game? In the OG days, yes, that is, you had to read the manual to even know how to open the game. That is like what they were originally there for. Then it kind of changed. It kind of changed to the game was teaching you how to play as you went, or it would front load it at the beginning of the game with a little tutorial level. And the manual was just there as a reminder for you to go back and look at certain information. If you, I forgot how to do the triple jump. It's this weird combat. I'll go look in the manual. We don't have that anymore because we have either inbuilt things in the menus for people to go look up certain controls, or Google. People just Google it, so there's no need for it anymore. But it's with pen and paper games. It's kind of it's going back to the kind of old way of doing it, which is you need to read this information to understand how to do the thing. You can't just do the thing and then go remind yourself. Like, you have to understand that information, and there has to be a baseline before you can start playing. And I think this tutorial level, this tutorial system could definitely do that. It's just, where do you stop? Do you, at the top of the mage tower, do you teach them how buckets and cart weight works?
Oh, you have to.
I mean, you enter the room at the top of the tower, and there is a cow pulling a cart with a load of buckets full of water in it. How do you proceed? Do you know what? That would terrify me. You think it's going to be this lich or this wizard, and it's just this cow pulling a cart in circles.
Yeah. It's like,
horror.
What do you do? Like, I don't even know what I'm looking at, so I don't know what to do. What's the point of this? Yeah,
and
really.
If you can't get past this room, we're not letting you play.
Yep.
Yeah, it could work for sure. Like, going into this conversation, I thought we were going to come to the conclusion of, I don't particularly think it's possible to do a tutorial for an RPG, because they're so complicated and there's so much stuff that you have to introduce. But I do actually believe that a condensed tutorial-like scenario for character creation is something that would solve so many problems. And I really like that idea. Like, does anybody know of any games that do that?
I don't. And that's why I'm talking about this with you right now. Because if there is, I would love to know, and I would absolutely read it. Oh man. Okay, I want to get your thoughts on this too. There's a lot. People have been posting a lot in chat, and and like, I want to read some of these that have been.
Yeah, let's go for it.
But I also have other things that are still on topic, and it's like, man.
All right, bring the top. We'll come if you've got an interesting thing, guys. Keep it in your, like, copy paste it, and then you can send it to us in a second.
Yeah.
We'll go through the other stuff, and then we'll loop back.
I'm curious if part of this, how you feel about a thing that gets me again from the disconnect of the text versus the game.
Yeah.
And do you think it would be better or worse to have things like like graph charts, like flow charts? Because a thing that I have a problem with is the non-linearity of a game. You don't know. Again, the mage tower. You want to go inside the mage tower. I can't have the first paragraph be about climbing the wall, because that might not be what you do. So if we have first paragraph climbing the wall, second paragraph bribing the guard, third paragraph casting teleport. If you don't give a hoot about, bribing or climbing, you're not going to read through those other ones, and you're going to think this information is useless before the end. So it's something like flowcharts and infographics where you could get bite-sized information and it clearly show information you're ignoring that you can go back to later. Do you think that's something that would help, or just kind of that's more of a different flavored Band-Aid?
It would, because you can do multiple things with it. You can either front load all of the information and let the player choose. You show them the options that they have, which then in turn will eventually kickstart that creative thinking, but also might do damage. You you either do it one way, which is you say that the goal is to do the thing. Your goal is get into the tower. That's goal one. That's all the information you give, and all of the options are on the DM side, and then they can relay that information if the player needs it. Oh, these are your options. This. The next goal is get past the guard, be it bribing, using sleep darts, or combat, or whatever. The player can choose to do all that, or you can do it in the other sense, which is you let the player know what their options are. Like, here's some simple options and a few creative ones. Let them look at them and be like, oh, I didn't know I could do that. Oh, that's really cool. I'll do that. And then eventually they can come back and look at those options, like you said, and see all these things and read back on the kind of systems they didn't use. Because the problem with, like, say, the player's handbook is there's so much information. Paradox of choice is so difficult to be like, you can't just go, I'm just going to go brush up on the rules and because you just get overwhelmed. Like, you just get overwhelmed by all of the information and you just wouldn't take it in. So a lot of the times scenarios happen in game, and then the DM or other players go look up the rules for that specific scenario. So I think in a sense it's about teaching that skill in a way. It's instead of relying on the DM, because if that's something that players commonly do, why not incorporate it into our tutorial, which is they pick a thing and you say, cool, go find that. Like, go look up that in the book. This is how you do it. This would need a very well put together book that is very easy to navigate and understand, which a lot of role-playing books aren't, because there's so much information. That's not me throwing shade. There's just so much information that they can't really make it super readable. But maybe teaching that, and your system of having like a flow chart, kind of this idea of having everything laid out in your options, would allow ease of access. You could go back and look at things and go, okay, well, if I want to bribe the guard, I need to roll X to do that, or I need to do this check, and okay, and then you can have a dialogue with your DM and get things done. So yeah, it depends on what you got. It depends how good your DM is, I think, because a lot of the time I think all of that stuff should be behind the curtain and they should be going through that information. But a lot of the times they're not. So yeah, I think both, which is the biggest cop-out answer ever. I think both.
Well, but I think that's a fair answer, because you do need if you have a tutorial style learning, unless it is like a choose your own adventure, you do have to have the DM. But if you have one that, people who want to understand it before they play it, they do need the flowchart or whatever it is that's in the rulebook, so they can read it, understand it, and then feel confident about going to play it.
Yeah.
Even if there is,
It depends on the player.
Say what?
It depends on the player. You have both, so that player can go into that if they want, but also the systems are also in place so that a player who just wants to be like, I have a cool idea, I want to try it, and wants to just be creative, and that's that, they have the freedom to do that. It's designed for all possibilities is the answer, but that also like triples development time and seemingly makes the book thicker and makes it more complicated. So it's a weird balance.
I think I think the size and number of D&D books that exist and have sold have kind of shown that the thickness of the book is not what stops people.
No.
But the familiarity with it and the practicality of it. People will buy a dozen freaking books for a game system because they want one thing out of it in a game they're playing.
Oh yeah, 100%, yeah.
So But then that's an exact thing that they want. They're not going to look at another book that's half as thick and is a full rule book for a whole game, because it's like, well, am I going to play it? Now I got to learn this new thing. That's a whole thing. Doggone it. People don't want to learn new games. And considering how bad they're explained, I don't blame a lot of people for that.
No, people just buying Xanathar's Guide just to get one like creature out of it. They're just like, I want this in my game, so I'm gonna buy this. Yeah, it's not the size of the books, but it's specifically like a lot of these problems and why we're theorizing this stuff is not for the players who want those books for the specifics, because they've played. It's for completely brand new players, and this would have to be a new system, right? It would have to be incorporated into a new system. It's not going to be Dungeons and Dragons. So if you're going to have new players and to have these, choose your own adventure, Mage Tower, character creation things, the book is going to have to be, a lot thicker, and you can't separate it, because if you had like effectively player's handbook, monster manual, DM guide, and an add-on which is the tutorial Mage Tower, that module, that little thing, would not sell. Like if you advertised it as a tutorial, no motherfucker would buy that thing, because nobody wants to think that they need to be told how to do a thing. Right. And this is why people get put off from playing D&D, because they have to be told by another human being effectively how to play. Yeah. So, or buy free books. So it's. I think thickness of a book is possibly important for new players, but that's just me. Maybe I just have a hierarchy of how important thickness is in my brain. I don't know.
Maybe you do.
Maybe I do.
Oh man, okay, it's a lot. I know I'm gonna have to kind of work a little backwards. I know Insightful said, I'm here late, so this is probably already said, but I think there's incredible value in seeing how the game plays out. Something like a demo of how a typical session of play might typically go, for me at least, which I feel like that could be great, except I personally have never had like two groups that I felt like I could say this is how a typical game goes, because of the freedom that tabletop RPGs have. That makes that so much harder, because it's what the individuals focus on that becomes typical.
And also like the intention of a tutorial, like, is the tutorial to inform a player of the baseline experience, or is it to teach them how to work in the system so they can play with those systems? I can see that. I can see the value of having it be this baseline thing. I think having a character creation, Mage Tower, everything has its own correlation and different thing to teach, works in that sense of it teaches players what combat is and how that works. It teaches players how a baseline level of role-playing works. It teaches them how the baseline level of stealth works for their class. So they have an understanding of, okay, well, if I play a thief, this is what the game's going to be like. This is what combat's going to be like. So when they go into new scenarios, be it role-playing combat or having to stealth around, they know what to expect, and that can then start thinking creatively.
Yeah, I think that in this case, for tabletop RPGs versus video games, where video games, the tutorial is teaching you the rules to use with a set number of outcomes. In tabletops, it's teaching you the rules that you can use to basically create an infinite number of outcomes.
Yeah, and that's the important part. That's, I think, the whole idea of the Mage Tower is not to necessarily teach the player. You said this earlier, Jesse, I'm just parroting you, but it's not necessarily to teach the player that there is a trap and this is how you solve it. It's just that there are traps and there are many ways you can solve it, whether it's telling them some of them but saying you can do it however you want. It's just letting them know that it's a thing, so then you can kickstart this creative thinking, and then the rest of the game becomes infinitely more fun because they know that every problem they run into, they can think of it in different ways, and it goes the same way for the DM. Like, I was always in the mindset of, when I created puzzles for my games, I would never come up with a definitive solution to that puzzle. There were a few ways they could do it, and I would allow my players to come up with batshit things that I would never think of because I'm not as clever as them, and come up with solutions to it. And do you know what? If it worked, okay, cool. That's just how it is. And we're trying to encourage that thinking. And I think the Mage Tower, in a sense, does that.
Insightful. Continuing on, saying, kind of, I was thinking in perspective of someone who had no idea about tabletop RPGs or how to run them, and maybe not knowing what the options are open to them. That, agree with Insightful on your thought of what a typical game is, which would require the whole thing that why I brought this up that stuck in my craw is that lack of linearity, which in practice is very good, but in order to teach someone something that has infinite options, you have to start with an option, and it might not be what they use, and your first 6 examples of how to play the game might not be something that they want to do, and how to try and figure out how to get to the part that they care about and like that they want to interact with.
That's why I like your like flowcharty idea, which is in the sense of, here are some ways to get past the trap. Like, say there's 3 options, you know, disarm, jump over, blow it up. But then there's a 4th option. With whenever we show people in this tutorial, we show people options of things they can do. There is also a 4th option which just says, do something else or pick your own way of doing it. And it lets them know that these aren't, because this is the problem with showing them options. They might get into the mindset that there are only a concrete amount of ways to do a thing. And that is the opposite of what we want them to think. We want them to think that there are, like you said, an infinite amount of ways of doing a thing. So we always give them another option that says, you know, do what you want, come up with your own idea or something like that. And then, you know, we encourage them to do that. Maybe in a way we also use our reward system like this. So I'm thinking very game designy, like video game designery here. And I can't stop that because that's just my background. But like, if you have 3 options, right? Mm-hmm. You can have the 4th option be do what you want and have its own reward. So you can disarm them in this ways, or you can come up with your own. And if you do, there is a reward afterwards. They don't know what it is, but there is something extra for you if you come up with your own way of doing it. Mm-hmm. So then we get into the player gets into the mindset of like, I am rewarded if I come up with creative ways of thinking about things. And we only need to do this a couple of times. It doesn't mean that every time the player's creative in our game, we have to give them something.
Right.
It's just to initially start that thought process, you use an extrinsic reward, be it the reward could just be something dumb or something funny, right? It doesn't necessarily need to be, you know, a hag busts through the wall when you disarm the trap and goes, "Oh, my hero," and then flies away. Like, that is your reward. Fuck you. Like, the player's not going to know what to expect. So I think possibly rewarding them in that sense as well. I'm obsessing over this Mage Tower tutorial idea. I'm in love with it.
Oh, that's good. Look, we can work together on this later and make the world's greatest. Here's how you freaking learn a tabletop RPG.
Oh, yeah.
I think Deeb said, oh, go ahead.
Yeah, I'm totally down to design tutorials. My favorite thing.
Oh, be still my heart. I'm very excited as extracurricular to make this work.
Hell yeah.
I think Deeb said this somewhere. It might have been someone else. Someone said that a thing is that a lot of the books are designed that it's having an experienced DM explaining the game to inexperienced people. And probably being assuming the DM is experienced because they have to learn too. And if they have to learn from playing, then you have failed at the learning the game, or the tutorial of the game.
Writing tabletop RPG books and rule sets and stuff is some of the most complex. Is the most complex design I have ever seen. Like they are they get infinitely more complex specifically because of that problem. You have to teach the DM to play before they play. And that's fucked. You don't read the manual before you play the game. You don't, nobody wants to do that. But you have to do that. Like there's no way of doing it. The only way you could really get around it is if, 6E comes out for Dungeons and Dragons and they have a video game that comes with it. You find it in a cereal box and the DM plays it and it simulates playing with players. And that's how you learn, is by doing that. That's the only way to properly get around it and not having the Dungeons Master's Guide being like this infinitely complex like brick of text.
So go ahead.
That's what I want. I want cereal box DM guides.
I'm on board with cereal box rewards. So for the Mage Tower tutorial, we need the tutorial of the players running through that the DM teaches them how to play. But before that, we need the tutorial that mimics the insanity of players so that the DM says what they want to do, and then they have a choose your own adventure of how players are reacting, and then they have to decide how to fix it.
Oh shit, what do you do?
Yeah.
And it's like you do this, or choose your own, and you get a reward.
Mm-hmm.
And the reward you get is the respect of your player. Every time. That's all you get. Yeah. Or you just get the players fucking up more. This system, Mage Tower system, works. I think for players, it actually works. Like, I really like the idea of it. Obviously, in practice, it would be very different. So you need to do playtesting and lots of design. The GMing part is the problem. It's coming up with a way to teach them how to GM. But that's always the problem. That is always the issue. The GM is always going to be the person who has to put in, unfortunately, before the game even starts, like hundreds of hours more effort into playing the game. They have to be dedicated to it. And, I've never met a DM that isn't, obsessed over their world and their craft and stuff like that. So that's great. But I think it's going to be difficult to get past that, needing that, because otherwise you do just need incredibly complicated cereal box video games to teach people how to play. And
I think that's I don't want to exclude people from DMing, but I think that's kind of fair, because you do got to be a little off. Like, you got to be a little bit of that personality to be willing to put that much time into something to make it work.
Yeah.
And that you have a deep need to tell a story. And like that's the reward. Yeah,
and I think that's one of the two things. I think all DMs are in a way entertainers. They're bards. They want to tell a story, and they want to entertain the people that they care about, their friends, and they want them to have fun. And to me, that's an entertainer. They're trying to entertain. And entertainers are off. Like, they are. I've never met someone who doesn't work in the entertainment industry who isn't like off.
Yeah.
Like, we're both off. Jack is off. Like, Amy is off. Like,
you have to be.
We're all off. Like, but like a few of us all really enjoy DMing, because we want that. We want to be able to take our ideas, and in our cases, it's primarily videos and like wanting to do that side of things. But if we're back to DMing, we would just want to share that, and you do need that kind of drive. If you just want to play for the sake of playing, well, those players won't really get to the DMing part of the game, because they'll start reading rules and then just give up. They'll just be like, oh, this is too much. And then that's not because they're weak or because they're not as clever as people who are DMs. I'm thick as shit, and I DM, but that's because I have the kind of madness in me to just push through and just be like, no, I am going to learn this. If I have to read this paragraph 10 times, I'm going to do it. If I have to watch videos, I'm going to do it. Just so that when we do play, I understand and people can count on me and we can do this and we can do that. So you do have to have that little bit of madness in you.
Yeah, it is kind of required, I think.
Yeah.
And there's nothing wrong with being a player, and because I know people that love tabletop RPGs, but they do not have a desire to run a game, or they run game and be like, cool, I got my fill, and like that's all they'll run. And maybe like 10 years later they'll run one more one shot, but like they enjoy the interaction, they enjoy the game, but that, you know, they don't have that kind of drive and that need, and still want to be able to learn new games and still be able to, like, rather than just being taught.
Yeah, 100%. And it's, I have friends who just GM and that's it, and they refuse to play, and that's fine. And I think in a sense, like, in no way, shape, or form are GMs like more invested. Well, they, in a sense, they are more invested because they have to put a lot more time in. But the beauty of this hobby is that it is a collaborative storytelling experience. I don't like GMs where they are telling a story and the players are watching and they are present, but they are not active players in it. They are just like watching and they can't do anything. That's like railroading to the max. Railroading is like sometimes important in certain scenarios, but I don't like that. I view this like genre, this hobby, as a collaborative storytelling experience. Your job as a GM is to help your players tell a story within your world and let them tell their story, and it's up to them how to do it. Obviously, you're the conductor, you steer where it goes, but ultimately it's trying to allow them to have those creative experiences and then tell their own story. And it's also up to the players to also put that effort in as well. You could just sit there as a player and, you know, be on your phone half the time and, you know, like zone out during combat and just do basic, I hit the dude, I hit the dude, I hit the dude, then look at your phone again until it's your turn. Or you can think creatively and think how you can do these things. And that makes the game infinitely more entertaining for the GM. The GM isn't like sitting there suffering for your pleasure, like, yes, I hope you're having fun, and just like coiling up and dying. They're trying to have fun too, and when you do crazy, creative, interesting things, one, it makes them panic, which is great.
It's delightful.
Because you're completely futzing with their plans, which is you making them improv, which I love. But also you're making it more entertaining for them, which is what they're there to do as well. And this tutorial system, the main crux for me is encouraging that play, because that's where the most fun for players and the GM comes from. And at the end of the day, we are trying to have fun. That is the goal. Have fun, tell a story.
Yeah,
for sure.
All right, I'm gonna try and get into some of these comments that have, some are now an hour old, so cool. Especially Discordia's from like the beginning of this, of how do you climb up the tower, which is there's someone up there with long hair.
Yep.
That's great. That's a great answer. I actually really like that. It's like, oh, okay, well, you know, how do you, and that's one of those, would I have written that in a choose your own adventure for that? Ooh, probably not. But would I, when a player says, you know, I wonder if someone's up there with long hair, like you know, it's like, oh, okay, well now I can teach you about social interaction. Yeah. This person does have long hair, but they're not convinced you're actually there to help them. How are you going to convince them? Like,
yeah, or to its most basic form of, is there even anyone there? You talk about like perception and looking for things and dice rolls for that. And you, as a DM, unfortunately, there's only so much the Mage Tower can do. A lot of it is up to the DM, and it's up to us as designers to give the DM options. Okay, well, what has the player done? Have they done something like this? Okay, well, within this scenario, you can do some of these things. And that's how you can teach them. I think the manual for the Mage Tower for the DM would be kind of thick, but it would teach them how to play Zoo. But yeah, you could teach them loads of things just based on what they say. The DM just has to be familiar enough with the rules to understand how to weave that stuff.
Yeah. Italia bringing up, sticking with the Mage Tower tutorial, maybe there's a hallway filled with traps that adapt to other solutions. One person dodges through. There are more traps above the traps now. Maybe they disarm one. Mechanisms are mechanically locked now. Force multiple players to solve the same problem different ways. That's something that I was also thinking about. Where if you have, we were talking about the Mage Tower and how do you get in, and we were saying like doing it individually. Could you do it as a group? Everybody needs to get into the Mage Tower, and this person weaves through the saw blades, and then someone disarms it and maybe give them the advantage on the next person trying to walk through, but there is something else that they have to learn when they go through it.
See, this is the idea of this would be a great first adventure for your party to do, but the idea of the Mage Tower tutorial, I think, is something that has to be done via a character creation or being alone, because it's trying to teach players what they can do individually so they can think in that way when they do those things in the future. If you do them together, one of the problems is that some players who aren't as socially loud or confident sometimes fall into the background when they play D&D, and they follow suit. So if one person does something and they are feeling not very confident, they might choose to then just mimic what they did, and in that sense they haven't learned anything. They haven't learned what the character can do. They're just copying someone else. So I do agree that a group scenario that's trying to teach how to do things as a group and different ways to do things is spot on. I think that is exactly what your first adventure should be doing when you design it for your party. But as a tutorial, I think there's value in doing stuff by yourself first to teach you the basics, and then going on into a group setting, because then everyone's going to start trying to think creatively in that scenario if they've done the Mage Tower.
Agree. Italian also bringing up earlier, character creation is generally better explained than the rest of the system, but that's not saying much, and you're expected to make really significant character choices before understanding anything about the system unless you research first. Yeah, that's a huge part of, I think, part of the huge flaw we have in tutorializing is I want to make, you want to make a character that could do this, but I want to make a there's a character I made who I wanted to be a size tiny sprite, just a 12-inch tall fairy, and I wanted him to punch people. I wanted to do physical combat with them, and within that system, no, you take massive penalties, but I built up a whole thing around it and it didn't work. And it's but I had this idea, having the character creation, God, that's another issue, is all of these things have to be from at least from how we understand them now. Your combat, your skills, your interactions, your social dynamics, everything has to be explained, but they are all interconnected and they all affect each other.
Yeah. And
then you have to explain this spider web of connections on why your character who could do this one way isn't necessarily going to affect them the way you think it will in this seemingly related things, because of how the social systems in Stars Without Numbers or whatever game you're playing works.
Yeah. And this is why doing mini scenarios based on character creation, I think, works. And you just have picking a class happen not in character creation, which I think is a way of doing it, which is you allow players to learn what they enjoy about the game before they solidify what they are doing in the game. You allow them to go into combat, to go into certain scenarios, and this doesn't have to be in character creation. It could be there are a few sessions of doing an adventure, then they get to choose their class effectively. They're given options. The person who enjoys combat and enjoys jumping into the fray and being at the front, well, they might have picked a different class at the beginning. They may have picked a thief, but now they've realized that they like playing in a different way. Well, if you let them play, then they get to the point where they're like, do you want to be a paladin? They're like, holy shit, yeah, that really suits how I play. That's going to be great. And they have this lust to want to do it. And people can still do the whole thing. Like, you could say that would take away from the whole idea of like creating a character. Oh, I don't usually play a paladin, but I'm going to make one and role play as one. Well, you can still do that. You can be like, I have the intention to be this, so I'm going to play this way. It's mainly just for brand new players that this is an issue. But yeah, that's a valid point.
Oh man, it's Dark Jackal.
Looking at a wall of text.
So much text. I copied and pasted some of them, but having to go through. But I really like Dark Jackal has said, I want to make an elephant person cleric who uses an entrenching tool as a holy symbol. What page should I look for that?
That's page 74, I think.
Yeah. That's subsection 82. Paragraph.
Yeah. Well,
E.
everybody knows that.
Yeah, that's right where it is.
Yeah. The entrenching tool. Yeah, that's where it is.
But it's hard for me, and this is why I like talking about it, because I usually wind up spinning my own gears when I think about it on my own. Is that interconnected and endless possibilities is what makes it so interesting and exciting, and why I love tabletop RPGs. Yeah, you can make an elephant person cleric with an entrenching tools or holy symbol. Like, yes, I can't do that in Dragon's Dogma. I love Dragon's Dogma. I can't do that in Dragon's Dogma. Like, this is the place for that.
This is the only place you can do that, and that's the beauty of it. And that's why I think with everything we're thinking of with tutorials, I think the main thing is encouraging that play. Encouraging the player to think in that way, to make creative, infinite, crazy decisions, and that they can do what they want and break them out of this video game mentality. Because once you do that, if there's anybody in the chat who is watching but hasn't played before, which I would find very interesting, to be watching RPG Help Desk but not played any tabletop RPGs, I think once you do, something will unlock in your brain and you'll become obsessed with them, as everyone does, because the idea of just being able to do whatever you want within the confines of specific rules and your DM's rules is intoxicating. And it's our job as designers of the games, the tabletop RPGs, to make that apparent as soon as we can, so people can enjoy our product. Thinking cynically. Yeah.
Totally. Insightfully Daft bringing up, there's a lot of value in not setting anything in stone for the first few sessions. So what if you find out you don't really like to play a bard in this game? Letting someone change something isn't going to be a big deal. It's so much work. I agree. I think that's part of why teaching how the game works and then being able to better choose, like, oh, I don't enjoy this, I do enjoy this, and knowing how to do that. But I absolutely do that. And I think it's an important thing is I let players know, like, if you want to change something within the first few games, if you learn that you don't like a mechanic or you want to play your character different, especially new players. For seasoned players, it's like, you didn't come to this table with a fresh idea and are throwing it out there. You've been stewing over this for months, and like, I know you're set. But yeah, if they want to change something, if they're like, this didn't work the way I wanted it to, absolutely, I think it's important to let them change it and to give them the option of, hey, I like this better. Here's what I can spend more of my resources or whatever into.
Yeah, 100%. 100%. Don't say no. Just find a way to make it work. Like, if it's bringing in a new character or it's completely changing. I remember, like, one of the first Dungeons & Dragons games I ever played, I played a Kenku monk, and they couldn't talk. And I was going to talk in like mimicking what other people were saying and using it to make sentences. But because I was new to the game, I already found it very hard to RP. And then on top of that, I was thinking in a different dimension of thinking what people were saying and how I could string it, and it just ended up in me being silent. I never spoke. And I wanted to, but I was just like, something would happen and I'd be like, I want to say no, we should go do this, but my character would just be like because I just couldn't think of what to say. So I went to the DM and I was like, I really don't like this. I feel like I can't talk. I'm like really struggling. Like I wanted RPing to be like a thing I could do, and I'm really struggling. And he was like, okay, well then in the next session we'll find a way so that your character can talk. And they found, I can't remember exactly how they did it, but it was this Arakocra city we were going to anyway, and they had the knowledge to allow Kenku to talk and stuff like that. And it completely changed the dynamic of the game. And I started enjoying it again because they went, yes, okay, let's find a solution for that. And not, no, you're playing a Kenku. They can't talk. Fuck you. You chose that. Get over it. Like, make another character. So it's just about adapting as a GM as well.
The best GM response. No, fuck you.
No, fuck you. Go away. Get out of this game. Kenku. Kenku monk. What are you? Get out.
Italian saying, Jermaine, I made that exact same mistake. OMG.
Really?
That's
Nice.
funny.
Yeah.
And both, when you're saying anybody in here that is interested in tabletop RPGs but has not played, both Penta Damn Rose and Special Cricket have not played but are interested.
Hell yeah, I can't recommend it more. It's hella fun.
Yeah, for both of you, I'm curious if you've tried to learn, like you tried to read a book and it was off-putting or something. Like what made you stop, and or what is it that would entice you to learn specifically? Because you're both new at this. Like JM8 and I can theorize what new players want, but like that ship had sailed decades ago for me.
Yeah, a long time ago.
Yeah, like I could try to learn it, but like learn new things and remember what it would be like. But no, that's a distant feeling. So
Yeah.
I would be curious if either of you have something for that.
Yeah.
Slash is saying DMs don't say no, fuck you. DMs say, are you sure you want to do that? Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
That's my favorite DM saying is like, what I'll say, they'll be like, all right, here's what I want to do. And I'll be like, you can
do that.
like, if a DM says that, it's like,
Oh,
you yeah, you can do it. And like, but like you have clearly not thought about a critical component to that plan that the DM has thought of. Yeah.
You won't like the outcome of this, so please reconsider. It's the way to translate that.
Penta saying, never even got close or made an attempt. I watched Adventures Nigh and found it fascinating. Okay, it is fascinating. Like I don't want to crow about it. We got 30 minutes left and we got to talk more about tutorials, but like, yeah, it's a very satisfying, it's a great mix of like the sort of socializing and fun and entertainment you get from a video game or a board game with people, and the mental nourishment of reading a book or seeing a play. Like
Couldn't put it better myself.
Oh, thanks. Like it's that sort of dichotomy, and I think it works so well.
Yeah, and freedom. Just like that switch going off in your brain and being like, oh, I can just, within the confines of the GM and physics and the game's rules, I can do anything. If it's feasible with the items and the skills I have, I can just go, yeah, I do this. And it's incredible and creates these really crazy and memorable like ludic play moments within the game, and not just for you as players but also for the DM. Like I think I mentioned it on the last time I was on, where I had this big thing planned in my setting where there were the spell sails were these pirates that like sailed the dunes, and they were going to be attacked by the lead galleon, and it was going to be intimidating and introduce new villains. And my players found a way to get on the ship and commandeer it, and then they just had a magic flying galleon. And I was like, because the ways they were like, yeah, we could get on like this, they made complete sense. And I just couldn't say, no, that doesn't work because fuck you. I was like, yeah, okay, it worked. You got good rolls and it makes sense. So that's happening. And then I had to adapt. And then the story went from like, it was like, oh yeah, this is cool. And it's like, oh, it's pretty cool. But now they have a spell sail galleon.
Mm-hmm.
So it's infinitely cooler. And they have that memory of like, oh, do you remember when we did this? And like, just having that freedom. That doesn't happen in video games. When there's a cutscene and the big bad is introduced, they say, hello, I'm the big bad. You should be scared of me. And they go. You don't have the option to sneak onto their big car and take it and kill them. Like, but in tabletop games, you do. You do have that option. You just need to think creatively. And once you flip that switch, it feels great. It feels amazing.
That totally happened in one of my games. They had long story short, there was a demon with a spaceship that was an antagonist to them. And they eventually managed to steal his spaceship through just absolutely like, again, that like, all right, everything you're saying makes sense and you are trying really hard. I'm not going to shut this down. Like, we're going to roll it and we're going to see what happens. And they ended up stealing the spaceship. And it was a delightful experience. And like, they could only have it for so long because of the temporal displacement and stuff. They knew it would eventually like crash if they took it outside of a certain space, which the demon also had to go through those rules. But then they had a spaceship that they were like, well, here's what we can do with it. And like, basically could use it as a like, well, we just want a giant missile. Well, we have a spaceship. Well, now we have a giant missile. Like,
we have a giant missile now.
Yeah. Stuff like that.
And those things are super, super fun. Like, and just letting them do it and just be like, yeah, cool, let's go. Super memorable moments.
Discordia bringing it up in the humor. Someone inevitably does something daft, which goes woefully wrong. Yeah. It's a great moment.
Or completely right, and it's like, that's dumb, that's never gonna work, and then it works. That is intoxicating because it's just like, I want to try everything. I want to do all these dumb things. Or like, your players are nearly dead, and then one person does this one crazy thing. And there was another thing where I didn't intend for it. This happened a lot. This might clue into how bad of a DM I am. There was a bit in my game where they met a chained god underground. They just like stumbled across it, and it like made mirror versions of them. And then I made it so that the players were they were controlling two separate versions of themselves. That was how it was played out. They were controlling both versions of themselves. And then one of my players was just like a rat bastard who would like abandon everyone if they had the chance, and was like, oh, two of me, that's really good, bye. And they both just left. and then for the rest of the game, they were off doing their own thing with two of them. So they had two players, and it fucked my game because he had two characters. Because I didn't envision that. But he was like, peace out. I'm not staying here. Like, we're both leaving. And then that led to like crazy solutions in the future when they had two versions of themselves to do really creative things. And it's just dumb. It's dumb. And like, and Jesse will be the same, and everyone who's played will have hundreds of stories like that of just these crazy things that have happened because of the freedom of these settings and these systems that we're playing in. It is intoxicating.
Yeah. Rat Beach bringing up a really good. Also, Special Cricket answered my question, and I want to get to that, but I feel like that's going to get us into a whole web of things. So first, Rat Beach talking, saying, I remember being a new player pretty well, and the pregame stuff like creating a character was the hardest without ever having played. and saying, you know, quote, what do you want to do with your character was really an unhelpful question. It would have helped to hear you might encounter X scenarios, so consider having a stat or abilities you think that would be helpful in those situations. Like you might find yourself in a fight, you're probably going to interact with a lot of NPCs, you'll probably camp out at night, and things will be sneaking. Yeah, Rat Beach, that's I feel like, yeah, with the tutorial, that's something that the Mage Tower tutorial that I think is important, is like, here are, and introducing, to your point too, Rat Beach, introducing players to the game, of giving them a set understanding and then leaving room for branching out. So like that, okay, you are probably going to find yourself in combat. Like, how do you want to deal with that? Do you want to fight? If you want to, how do you want to fight? Do you want to avoid fighting? If so, how do you plan on avoid fighting? Do you want to just support people? You know, giving a few options in that and saying, okay, so if you want to support, well, do you want to support by doing this, this, or this? And they say one of those three, or they might go, actually, I'd rather do this, then being able to incorporate that in. Because, yeah, that just, for me now, as you know, playing tabletop RPGs for so long, yeah, you could do anything exactly what I want to hear, because that's how I want to approach it. But that's, you are correct, not helpful for new players.
Yeah.
Because if you also don't understand how the system works, then you don't know how to build the character to do the thing you actually want to do.
Yeah. And you're not fully aware of, like, yeah, it's coming back to what we were saying about, like, giving Rabbi saying, like, you need to give the player an idea of what's coming. And again, that all comes down to the DM. An experienced DM would be able to sit a new player down and be like, right, with this group and me as a DM, you're going to be encountering a lot of role playing. You're not going to be getting into combat as much, so do not make a barbarian with like 1 intelligence and wisdom. Like, there needs to be some semblance of your communication and how you build your character. Or this is going to be a very combat heavy game, and there is going to be sneaking, there is going to be camping, this is going to be like a survival type game, so you're going to need to think about that. That comes from an experienced DM. From a baseline just tutorial system that a new DM could kind of introduce, I think the only way of doing it is what we were saying, of having them pick those things after they've already experienced some of it, so they play for how they want, not for what they expect. So they indulge in a little bit of combat RP and or like sneaking and stuff, and then they think, right, I enjoy these aspects, so I'm going to build a character around that, rather than this is what to expect. It's like, this is what you can be like, experience, so build a character now. So it all depends, but that takes a lot of time. So yeah,
and a lot of understanding of the world, the game type, what they want. What is this map you just opened?
That I forgot that was there.
It's off. It's off camera, yeah. But I just saw it, was like, what is
anyone
this?
Who likes Harry Potter, this is the Marauders map from Harry Potter.
You got to put it in front of your face. It's really narrow.
Oh, okay. Wait. Jesus Christ. Okay, it's the Marauders map.
That's pretty freaking cool.
Yeah, it's very cool. I forgot that was there, so ignore that.
Okay, we'll strike it from the record.
Yeah, bang. Out of here.
And I think in this, I'm gonna say hypothetical, but probably vastly becoming more practical Mage Tower tutorial, where it's like, oh, I want to play a 1 int barbarian that is still going to have, like, okay, how do they interact with people? Like, I've enjoyed playing like really, you know, characters where whatever system we were using, the mental stat is the dump. Like, and I'm like, sweet. I played some character that was like really big and strong and very kind, but like not intelligent, and was a goat farmer. and like everything related to like this, well, goats do that, and like everything kind of fell back on like this base knowledge of goat farming, and it was really fun. But that was built into like, this is how the character will interact. It doesn't matter that they're not, charming or intelligent or going to be able to read people. They're still going to talk to people. They're just going to do it in this way,
a different way.
Yeah.
There's someone I played with recently who's new, and they did the same thing. Their character was hyper obsessed with a specific thing, and that is how they interacted with the world. Everything they did revolved around that thing, and for a new player, that gave them, in my eyes, obviously they might have a different thing, but what I could see was that gave them a really easy, not out, but in for RP. It gave them a direction. And a lot of the times we can do this by understanding our characters, but that's a lot harder for new players. They don't have the full idea of like their entire character's backstory or how they would act in every situation. But if they're, dumb and obsessed with goat farming, then they always have something to go back to. Like, there's an awkward lull in a conversation, and they're just like, so what's your opinion on goat farming? That then starts a bunch of RP. Like that's how it works, and I love it.
You ever think about grass-fed versus corn-fed?
There we go. Yeah. And then the DM's gonna get some awesome RP back. It's gonna be great. Yeah. I love it.
All right, so Special Cricket answered a little while ago. We got about 15 minutes left.
Okay.
Special Cricket saying, never tried learning anything about tabletop RPGs, but got interested through being a video gamer, following The Escapist, and following you guys. I've got no gaming friends, so trying to learn where to start, and scared I'm not outgoing enough to roleplay. It can be tough to find a group. Like, there's I did a whole panel at a con on like, I did a 50-minute talk on like how to find people to play with. Like, it is kind of a difficult thing to broach.
Yeah.
For how to find people, even if you don't have friends, there are, I don't know if you're in the States or UK and or Brazil or I don't know, anywhere in the world, where there are different ways, like meetup.com. I know there's some Reddit groups like looking for group LFG, r/LFG. There's if you have a local gaming store, they'll have things store. Yeah, they'll have a schedule, or you could just call and ask, and you can try and find some people that way. But the outgoing enough to roleplay, like, let me tell you, that I think that's a fear about 99% of people who play tabletop games have, and 98% of them are excited that they did it, and like it becomes one of the like pillars of what makes the medium enjoyable.
Yeah,
it's
become addictive.
Yeah, it's because it is scary. Like, I still if I'm with a group, like, I love doing accents. I'm terrible at them, but like I still enjoy like that level of performance. Sounds like I'm good at it, but that level of performance in an awful way,
no, I get what you mean.
Yeah, that like is invigorating and does help kind of create the scenario and the character of, this story that's being told.
Yeah.
Oh, you look like you're gonna add to that, so I'll stop.
No. It's I think it's something that, unfortunately, it's like making new friends. There's this base level of anxiety when meeting up for the first time, or like the first few meetings. It's the exact same thing you get with a new group, but it is something that you will be wholly grateful to yourself for pushing past and doing, because like some of my closest friends in the world I have met through tabletop stuff. I feel like I have like I know it sounds weird, but I have like a deeper connection with them than I do from friends I've known for yonks, because we've done the act of like playing and role playing together, and I know it sounds super like soppy, but like going on these adventures together. And I think pushing past that is a healthy thing. And also the RPing will just fall into place. You will learn what level of RPing you are comfortable with, and you can also make your character based around what you're comfortable with. You can try and make a boisterous character to try and get that RPing side out of you, but then realize that you like kind of sitting in that middle ground. Then just change your character slightly, like go to the DM, say I'm gonna scale it back, I'm gonna do this, and just do it naturally. And it will just fall into place, and RPing opportunities will just happen. And also your players, the other people you're playing with, and the DM understanding that you're new is really important, because then they will look for opportunities to help you RP. So the DM will look for opportunities to pull you into conversations that aren't super complicated and and aren't antagonistic, because a lot of the times with RP, a lot of people fall over when people or other NPCs start getting like antagonistic and angry and argumentative, because it's natural for a lot of people to fall back and like want to get out of situations like that. But a good DM and other players will start to build you up to that, rather than just you start playing, you're in the tavern, and the first NPC is like "fuck you," and it just like starts to like argue with you. That's not what's gonna happen. They'll wean you in.
Yeah, I think to kind of what you're saying, I think it's really important to making a character and making it understand that like they'll RP to something you're comfortable with.
Yeah.
As you said, like don't make someone that's like, I'm gonna seduce everybody, when you're not really comfortable with that, or maybe the table isn't comfortable with that, or you're like, I'm gonna be a real boisterous asshole to everybody, but you're not really comfortable talking to the other people like that. But you might be. I had a player who his character was a mind flayer trying to understand what empathy was, and like that's how he came to interactions, was like just people with a clipboard, and was like just asking them questions about like feelings. And like it was a weird interaction oftentimes, but like a real delightful thing, and that it was something that they were comfortable with and that worked out well, and that they were able to lean into it.
And like you said earlier, build your character around it. Build your character around those interactions. Have them have this one defining thing that they can fall back on in RP, so that you always have that kind of card you can pull out. And if you feel not necessarily uncomfortable, but you feel like you don't know what to say, you can always just fall back on it. As long as it's not something hyper specific. If you started talking about goat farming every single conversation, it might get tired for certain things, but it's always something that you can fall back on. So yeah, I highly recommend seeking out groups, be it in like the Escapist Discord, asking if anybody wants to play, if anyone can put together a game, or like Jesse was saying, all of these different places you can look, local game shops, and go for it, because I think it's a really healthy hobby for anyone, especially people who and I'm not saying that you do cricket, but for anyone who struggles with certain elements of anxiety or social things that why are you laughing?
Discordia brought up if someone told the story of blunt trauma on the subject of low intelligence character. Blight, who's a delightful friend of mine, had a character who I think it was the zombie apocalypse. They woke up from a coma and they didn't know who they were. They had amnesia, and they looked on their chart at the end, and the hospital's empty, the zombie apocalypse happened. And he looked on his chart, and the first thing he saw was blunt trauma, and was like, oh, that must be my name. But that's what he was in there for. And so he was like a big jock with just like no memory, really bad intellect, and his weapon was just like a set of weights, but all the weights were on one side, and he used it like a mallet.
Amazing.
Yeah, it was blunt trauma. And like, the first character I made in when I played the first Fallout game was blunt trauma, and I gave him like an intelligence of 1, And I strike for that because I thought it was really funny.
Amazing. I love that. I love that to bits. That's great. Oh god.
All right. I think we got like 7 minutes left. So
Yeah.
tutorials.
Yes.
Do we have anything else? Do you have anything specific that we haven't talked about yet that you're like, if people walk away with one thing, or like something that you hadn't been able to talk about yet but you really wanted to get to?
There's nothing that I think, because really interestingly, and this is why I love discussing these things with you, is I came to the table thinking I don't think this is a problem that can be solved. And then we came up with ideas that could feasibly solve a lot of these problems. And that's why it's been a great discussion. But I would, if anybody could take anything away from this, especially if you're thinking about DMing, think about crafting, in a sense. Maybe it could be in character creation, maybe it could be in like a session 0, or the first adventure you take your players on. But think of ways of how you can introduce mechanics and specific ways of playing to your players in a natural way that allows them to think in creative ways, because that is the key. You want to encourage that. If your players are new, you want to make sure they know that even though this game has strict rules, it doesn't have strict rules, and you can do more than what the page is telling you, because players are going to get very bogged down in the specifics of the rules in the book, and you just need to kind of break their brain free of that. So try and design your campaign, especially its beginning sections, with that in mind. How can I encourage creative decision making from my players? And that's probably it boiled down to its most simple form on my end. What about you? Is there anything you haven't had the opportunity to say? Because I've been yapping.
I mean, probably if my brain worked properly, I'd probably have like a checklist of things of like, here's what I... Yeah. God, it seems so nice. Like, I hear people talk about like how their brains work, and that sounds really nice. Like, it's organized.
Yeah, I don't have that. I've never had that. I also like, maybe it's something. Maybe it's a dyslexia thing. Maybe it's maybe it's like a weird dyslexia thing. Because like I can't like focus on more than like one thing at a time. Like, if right now the only thing that exists in the world is you and this conversation we're having right now, and I'm very bad for that. Like, really, really bad. I could be ordering food at a restaurant, and the entire restaurant could be on fire, and the world could be exploding outside, and I'd still be looking at the menu like, do I get the fish fillet? Like, what do I do? Maybe it's dyslexia. Maybe I'm just an idiot. I don't know.
I mean, a thing having nothing to do with RPGs, I think a thing with humanity that I find so fascinating and frustrating is this idea of like a default human. Like, this is what a person should be. This is how a person should think. This is how a person should act. And anything outside of that is abnormal. When it's like, that doesn't work in any aspect of like nature that we understand. That everything has like a mathematical set function and like through line. Like, and especially with more complicated life, the more complicated it gets, the more that varies.
Yeah, and I think that's completely true with like humans. And like, as you said, as we get more complex, that is wholly true. I completely agree. The idea of like there being a normal is a complete construct of society and is utter bullshit. But like a seahorse is only going to do its base function and then die, unfortunately.
Right.
But also a seahorse can't play D&D.
That's very true. Like, the seahorse can't play in D&D, or it's like a dog or a cat still can't play D&D, but is more complicated than the seahorse and does have more variables within it.
Oh yeah,
and kind of
there's no default dog. Like, my puppy I get compliments all the time on like how well trained she is. Big quotation marks there. And I just tell people it's 95% not me. She is just, she wants in her base nature of her, not, this isn't dogs, this is just her. She wants to behave. She doesn't bark. She doesn't like attack people. She's not aggressive. She's just relaxed. And that's just the way she is. And people think, oh, like all dogs are one way in like because of their base nature and stuff, but they're individual creatures. They all have their own their wants and desires and like just the way they act. And I think expecting humans to fall into that of like, oh, you're odd because you don't think in the way I do, or dress, or do all those things is kind of weird. Which is ironic because they think they're normal, but they're the weird ones.
None of us are normal. We're just ourselves. Exactly. Or we're mimicking someone else. Those are your options.
So, actually, there's a fourth hidden option, which is transcend.
Ooh, man.
You can start levitating. Did you guys know at any point you could just start levitating?
Oh my gosh.
Did you know that?
I did
Give
not.
It a go. Hit me up on my twitter.com if you can levitate.
At me directly. I want to know.
At me directly on twitter.com. Quote twat me. None of you will get that. But Jesse does.
Discordia also bring it up about rules and games, saying it has the rule of cool, which will be strictly adhered to. Yes, the rule of cool is the most important rule, in my opinion.
That should just be the rule. That should be the tutorial.
Yeah.
It's like rule of cool. That's it. Yeah, no.
The most agree. Unhelpful tutorial we could possibly make.
Rule of cool. It just says rule of cool on a black screen and then disappears.
And then the game starts. There you go.
I know how to play now. Wow.
All right, it is 2:00. JM8, tell people about where they should find more of you, or whatever you want to say.
I do things occasionally. I am on The Escapist. I just had, my mind went blank then. I forgot who I was. I had just had an episode of Anatomy come out on The Escapist. It's out for early access members. It's on whether the simplicity of Stray makes it less of a game. And how difficult the games need to be considered games. And I get into defining what a game is, which is a lot more complex than it sounds. So yeah, I've done that. I'm working on the next one. I'm just about to finish editing the latest quest log, which me and Marty mainly Marty. I'm just editing it, which is out tomorrow. There's no Friday stream with me and Marty. What else? Oh yeah, keep your beady cheesies, which are these, peeled, because I, as a few of you will know, I'm working with an indie studio as a sound designer and level designer. And we are going to be dropping our first big trailer and Kickstarter soon. So I'll keep you guys updated on that. But there's going to be more news coming out on that soon. So some really cool things happening in the back end. I'm really excited to show you. But yeah, that's me. Check out Anatomy. Check out game stuff. That's me.
Sweet.
Yeah.
And thank you so much for being here.
Anytime,
I really appreciate it.
Just say,
well, go ahead.
Just be like, Jay, RPG help desk is happening literally right now. I'm already streaming. Get on here, and I'll just show up.
Just tell you the topic when you get here, and you'll be like, all right, cool. Let's
legit. Like, I'll just be like, cool, let's fucking go. Especially if it's anything to do with like design. As you can see, I find it very hard to just shut up about design stuff.
But why would you shut up about it? It's so fascinating.
I love it. Yeah. So just give me a topic and go. Just okay, there you go. Talk about that, and I'm like,
yeah,
I love it. Anytime. I'm happy to be here. Anytime.
Game design is so fascinating. I understand why other people don't enjoy making games, because it is tedious, it is time consuming, and you can have a lot of work shattered in a very short amount of time because of a small oversight. Like one misstep in a rule and someone learns how to break your game, and you literally have to start over because it's an intrinsic part.
Yep.
But like, that's fine. Like that, I can deal with that. I can't deal with an office job, but I can deal with that.
Yeah.
Like,
Yeah, fucking office job. But like mindlessly beating my head against the wall to fix one individual thing is like it's heaven. I love it. Or
Mhm.
like just designing, stupid sound effects for giant monster creatures is incredibly fun.
oh yeah, that's
Just-
good stuff.
How can I make the sound of this chair sound like a T-Rex? Let's go. And you make it work.
I
You make it work.
freaking love it.
Yeah.
I stream on here, and that's my name and everything. If you're here and you don't know about me, that's fine. I guess you got here through
That's
some other
interesting.
means. But
That's interesting.
yeah, I don't know how you would, but that would be cool. So hi.
Yeah.
I mean, a few people actually did follow along. Special Cricket, and I think one other person. Nope, I'm wrong. Just Special Cricket. But it's cool to see some new people in here. So yay.
Hell yeah.
Thank you. I'm gonna stop streaming, and then I'm gonna start it back up because I'm actually gonna play Fortnite now from about 2:15. So,
Sweet. You're gonna stop and then just start again in a
yeah,
in
because
10.
I have to switch off the like going to YouTube and stuff and just change it to
Okay, for
Twitch.
sure.
So if people want to stick around, I'll be doing that. If not, I'm not your dad. I hope that you enjoy whatever it is that you're doing with your life.
Well, I am your dad, and you should watch. You should watch Jesse play Fortnite. So,
Oh my gosh.
Do what I tell you. So yeah, bye.
All right, you have a good one, everybody. Thanks, JM8. Thanks, everybody.
See ya.
Take
Bye.
care.